Adults of Reddit, what was something you were unprepared for when you first moved out of your parents' house? The fact that $100 is no longer a lot of money. I remember how that huge green €100 note always felt like I can buy the world with this. Just last week I had to call a craftsman. After he was done I had to give him 5 of my world buyers. Loneliness by far. I loved living by myself, but lying in bed without my cat on my bed, or without hearing my mom laughing downstairs made the room feel very small and secluded. I have a co-worker who has that same feeling. So much, in fact, that he actually feels more alive hanging out at work since he has friends there instead of his apartment where it's dark and quiet and boring. The cost of food and how fast it goes bad. I understand now why my parents were poor. I lived there. You need to actually think about what you want to eat each and every day. I still can't get over it. That might be the worst part. Not paying for all that food or preparing it, but figuring out what you want to eat every single day. The amount of depressing things that come in the post, bills etc. How alike my mom and I are. I used to tell her to chill with the household chores. She couldn't chill. I can't chill. Must clean. Oh geez. Same here. I clean all of the time, albeit less now with a baby, but still I have to spend part of Saturday getting the house in order. I'm amazed that my parents kept the house so in order despite working 10+ hours with 2 little girls. Being on my own if I got sick. I once got food poisoning when my roommate was away for the weekend, vomiting every 20-30 minutes for an entire day. I was severely dehydrated and didn't even have the strength to walk to the drugstore for meds and Gatorade. Nothing screams wait, I wasn't prepared for this, like vomiting at 3 AM on the bathroom floor alone. Only done it like a few times. Happy things don't just happen, you decide to do them. All those fun events and great memories you had growing up, the birthday parties, beach trips, days you decided to turn the living room into a castle of sheets and cushions. My parents deliberately planned those things, or gave their own time on a whim, because they wanted me to be happy. Even if I'm tired from work, I try to plan fun, silly events and always celebrate holidays, because I realized no one's going to do it for me anymore. Some things I've done to make my own life nice. I pick myself wildflower bouquets, or sometimes from people's shrubs if they're near the road. SHHHH. I often take myself to the beach. I like to drive fast with my windows down and good music blaring. I journal a lot. I take myself out to the movies on weeknights. I actually prefer to see movies alone. I'm free to emote as I please, and I don't have to explain anything to anyone. I strike up a lot of random conversations with people on transit, restaurant waitstaff, folks working at coffee shops, etc. It feels good to make human connections. I teach. Teaching is one big high for me. I'm always on the lookout for neat treasures on the ground. Lone earrings, a nice rock, and red autumn leaf. Get a warm cup something and hold it in both hands while you walk around on a cold day. Best ever. I guess these aren't necessarily holiday things, but they're still special, and make my life joyful. Not having condiments or spices on hand. I took for granted having salt and pepper and whatever spice I needed in the cupboard. Buying all that at once can add up quickly. Yes, it can. I've been known to give a nice basket filled with seasonings as a housewarming gift. Water cost money. I grew up on a farm with well water. It completely blew me away people had to pay for tap water. Years later I feel bad for people in cities that don't provide drinkable water. Our hometown had an oil pipe burst and contaminated their drinking water. Many people came to our farm for drinkable water. I also missed the safety purr of my dad's steady snoring in the night. The amount of small things that needs to be done on everyday basis. Cooking, house cleaning, dishwashing, laundry, etc. And this does not include homework, if you are a student, hobbies, personal life. I'm just so tired of all that stuff. You have to clean everything yourself. Even in a small apartment, that's a big job. No wonder my mom got so off when my sisters and I couldn't keep our rooms clean when we were kids. Food is so expensive. I moved out a few months ago and that's been the thing I was least equipped to deal with. Pro tip. Don't get all your groceries at one store and if it wasn't obvious ball out on some coupons. Don't forget to buy toilet roll. There is no magic toilet fairy despite appearances. It appears that I am the toilet roll fairy. I am glad to have reminded you all to buy more. How wrong my idea of independence was. Sure, you can do whatever you want whenever you want, but almost every activity generates waste in some capacity that you need to deal with. Also, if you have a full-time job, having to forego hanging out with friends that don't. Sorry guys, I can't hang out until 2 AM on Tuesday to play video games anymore. Got to be up at 6. It's even worse if you work graveyard shift like I do. Up at 1240 Monday through Friday. Work 3-1 Monday through Wednesday. And 3-3 on Thursday and Friday. I have no time for friends through the week. They are drinking margaritas and watching football when I'm asleep. How much time it really takes to cook your meals. Plus if you're living alone you'll start wondering if it was worth the trouble rather than eating out. My experience was the opposite of most. I was surprised how little work it was to maintain a single person one bedroom. I was expecting an absolute heck of chores and lack of free time. A lot has to do with decluttering before moving out and adapting a more minimalist lifestyle, but still. Also, math before moving. Yeah, going from cooking, cleaning, laundry and dishes for a family to alone was a big difference. Took my parents months to relearn how to plan, shop and cook after I had been doing it since I was 15. And laundry day doesn't mean 10 machines anymore. Now it's 2-4. How much happier I would be. Like 80% of the stuff it off financial and TBH. I had been paying for all my own crap long before I moved out, so none of that was a surprise. But having the whole place to yourself, that's total freedom and independence. And I never realized how much it contributed to personal happiness. However, it's a double-edged sword. I was also unprepared for how lonely I'd be. First time moving out, I lived alone. Man, it gets really lonely at times. I finally realized why all my friends Tindered so much. Especially after college when everyone goes their separate ways. There have been times when I've gone on Tinder dates just to have someone to hang out with for the evening, in a completely wholesome way. Living alone gets incredibly boring if you don't have close friends nearby. The lack of auto-refilling cupboards in the kitchen. When I ate all the food, the cupboards just stayed stubbornly empty. At my parents' home they always magically refilled. Technically you can set up monthly weekly grocery delivers. Just gotta move it from the front door to the cupboard. Renting. One tip I can give is when you move in and fill out the entry report, be as absolutely thorough as you can. Take the time to fully inspect everything and write it down on the entry report. Even the tiniest of marks, stains and any other damage that is present when you move in. And take photos. Photograph everything and keep those photos safe. Real estates will try to blame you for everything they can take you for when you move out so that they and the owners don't have to pay for repairs. Cover your ass. The odd sense of a lack of security going to bed the first few nights. I'm close with my parents, so when I lived at home I always felt a bit safer that they were downstairs when I went up to bed. It was weird when that was gone. Yeah, I used to close and lock my bedroom door first month into apartment living for double security. Finding a new doctor. Still haven't seen one since I moved out 3 years ago. When something seems to be slightly wrong I just hope that it will get better without seeing a doctor. I'm kind of worried that I'm going to regret this at some point. You are. Google your city and doctor. Call one of these. Don't play with your healthcare. The loneliness. It's so eerily quiet right now. I am playing random music. Random tracks from Undertale or Half-Life. Music just to distract from it. I used to love being alone when I was surrounded by people 90% of the time, but now years of it has been depressing. I miss family. Maybe not my family, but people you live with. Life is just cleaning, cooking every so often, going to work, sleeping, and maybe an occasional fun thing that you just barely enjoy. Nothing happens unless you alone scrape up the willpower to do it, and sometimes you just have to be like a robot to keep going. Oh my god, I am not looking forwards to moving out at all now. You become an adult when you make a run to the store for a plunger, and nothing else. I've learned that you actually become an adult when you learn to take a joke, loving everyone else's stories though. Oh, so right. I did that about 2 months into living in my first apartment. I know the people at Lowe's didn't care what I was buying, but I swear I felt everyone staring at me and thinking his crap just clogged the toilet. The lack of conflict. When I was a kid, I'd always gauge the mood of the house when I got home. I got really good at instantly knowing if my parents were okay with each other, or if they'd had a huge fight and weren't speaking to each other. The latter situation was much more common. When I got my own place, I remember coming home, locking the door behind me, and just drinking in the peaceful silence and lack of stress. It was amazing. Yes, so glad to see this one on the list. Going home was always kind of scary because I knew I'd have to deal with at least one angry parent, and playing my cards right to not upset an already testy parent every night was soul crushing. How scary getting hurt is when you're by yourself. If you cut your finger badly by accident, you're the only who's there to help. Definitely keep a first aid kit in your house. It's the one thing I've bought that I hope I never need to use. Having to set up all my own appointments and services. The freedom. The fact that I could go out without hearing "Where are you going? It's 11 o'clock." Or waking up at noon on Saturday because I had a few drinks Friday night and watched TV until I was dang well good and ready to go to bed. Not having to explain what I was doing. Cleaning up the place when I felt like it and not one freaking minute before. Married with 2 teenagers now and I'm doing the exact same things to them that my parents did. And I realize that they weren't the hovering control freaks that I thought they were. They were just parents. Married with 2 teenagers. Hold up. It was so much easier than I expected. My parents made me feel I was generally incompetent and too irresponsible to live on my own. Finally moved out and was amazed that I could keep my place clean, cook, and handle finances on my own. Fast forward 30 years, I'm doing freaking really well. Same here, I left home with nothing, no education. Did just fine on my own. After a year I moved country and now make more than my parents. Credit checks. I thought I would have been able to find an apartment easy. Nope. And that you have to sometimes pay a deposit, last and current month's rent and make a certain amount to even get considered. I remember one complex made it a requirement to have apartment insurance or something like that. Apartment insurance is just smart. If the building burns down, they can rebuild, but you get jack squat. And it's stupid cheap. About $15 a month last time I had to buy it. The peace and quiet. Same here. My parents had the TV blaring constantly. Dad was a little hard of hearing and I could hear it everywhere in the house. I loved the quiet of my apartment, even though I had moved from the suburbs into the big city, and a house to an apartment building. Not having someone there to remind you of your responsibilities. I did all my own chores and often cook my own food while still living with parents. I moved out at 24, but my mom used to yell into my room at times like, "If you don't do your laundry now, you won't have anything to wear for work tomorrow." And so I'd sigh and pause my game and start on laundry. After moving out, I was constantly doing chores last minute, so my laundry was never fully done. Only one room in my apartment would get cleaned. I was constantly going to the corner store to get stuff for dinner instead of paying much less by making a big Walmart run, etc. It's not that I was lazy. Heck, I was working 60-70 hours a week when I first moved out. I just needed to learn to think about chores first because I was used to being reminded by someone who already had that crap all planned out. At first you think it's depressing that you only have a couple hours a week for leisure, but then you realize it's much more depressing to go through life with a dirty place, no clean clothes, and constantly eating McDonald's or ramen. The secret to that is to set a schedule so you don't have to think about whether to do them. It's Tuesday, that's laundry. I had to do that with gassing up the car. I decided to not bother with the gas gauge and just always fill up on Wednesday and before and big trip. Buying light bulbs. Seriously, it never occurred to me that I would need to replace them on occasion. And there are quite a few types. The first ones I bought were about as bright as the sun. Also, to check the light bulbs before buying replacements. A couple lights went out, so I bought some replacement standard size bulbs, only to find out the 2 that went out were tiny bulbs. How good it actually feels to be away from family while at the same time missing them and the place you lived in terribly. I didn't live with my parents, but you get the picture. How hard it is to keep an apartment clean. So much upkeep required. How much of a difference in cost it makes in the heating bill during winter by keeping the indoor temp 2 or 3 degrees colder than what might be comfortable. I now understand the years of my stepdad acting like an uptight guardian of the thermostat, constantly telling us just put another layer on. Literally everything about life and the real world. They would always tell me to do or don't do things with zero explanation or advice backing up why they wanted me to do not do those things. I grew up Mormon. I hope you're better off now. Money management. First month was very difficult as I didn't know how to assign certain expenses. Threw a party first week and pretty much spend everything. Had to survive on my savings. It's kind of depressing how many people don't know this. From day one moving out I had a budget that I kept in my notebook with everything laid out for how much I could spend, how much I would save and what not. It's awesome that you have figured it out. Not everyone does. Regular dish soap is not the same as dishwasher soap. I flooded my first apartment kitchen with bubbles. Lots and lots of bubbles. Along with generally how much money and work it takes to keep up. My parents did the exact same thing not long after they got married. I almost did the same thing a couple of months ago myself. Oops, didn't fill up my kitchen with bubbles. Managed to notice it ahead of time and they only got a foot or so from the dishwasher. I was unprepared for the realization that I was not the person causing all the problems in the house I grew up in. I had a place all my own, alone. Every bit of trash in the apartment was mine. If it was in the trash can, I put it there. If it was on the floor, it was my fault. My apartment was cleaner than the house I grew up in. Because I wasn't the person making the messes I had been blamed for growing up. I ate better than at any other point in my life. Because I was buying my own food, and preparing it, and enjoying it, without being criticized for my meal choice. Don't get me wrong, I made mistakes, burned a few meals, forgot to take out the trash a few times, skipped laundry day more than once, but all of that was on me, and me, alone, was better than living at home with family. Ultimately, I was unprepared for life outside of a toxic environment. How much of my money went to rent? I was unprepared for the sheer amount of bills that I had to pay on a minimum wage job. I planned to make chocolate chip cookie dough and eat the entire batch. Turns out there was a reason my parents hadn't allowed that. I couldn't look at cookie dough for a couple years after that. I really am an adult. Some lessons must be learned by fire. Myself. I licked clean a thick bowl of leftover frosting. So much delicious. So much suffering. It is utterly amazing to be free of an abusive household. I realized that moving out was not nearly as scary as my parents made it out to be. Sure, cheese is expensive and you can't save as much money, but it's a small price to pay. How happy and relieving it was not walking on eggshells all the time because they would freak the frick out on you all the time for the tiniest thing or show up drunk and yell. I still consider moving out one of the best days of my life and it was like 8 years ago. Having absolutely no one to hold me accountable for anything. My life went wild after I had no one to answer to but myself. Moved out at 16 and I wish I hadn't. I made a lot of terrible financial and personal decisions that rippled forward into some pretty big issues later in life. There are a lot of factors at play, but I feel that if I waited a few more years and had my folks there to keep me in line a bit longer I would have ended up a little better prepared and in better shape for the road ahead. Nothing, really. When I moved out, I was kind of surprised how nothing changed. I would sit on the computer all the same, wash my clothes and dishes all the same. The only thing that changed was having to buy food, but it was kind of automatic. It's just easily cooked stuff. That electric bills in the winter, in the Midwest, are freaking brutal. I had no idea that it costs so damned much money to keep a small little apartment, with electric heat. At a livable temperature. I averaged about $80 to $100 a month for the first few months, then about $200 for November, December, January, and a massive ice storm hit, and suddenly I was faced with a $580 electric bill I couldn't pay. Thank God for mom and dad, because the electric company sure didn't give a crap. Just to add, this was more than a decade ago. I have since moved 4 times. My current place has electric heat, but I'm well versed on space heaters, keeping the temp low, and dressing in layers. Trust me, I learned my lesson. My electricity is cheap in the winter due to me and my roommate liking the cold and keeping it around 68-70. The summer sucks balls. Bill doubles and a half. Like this video and this good boy will play you a nice song. Like and subscribe, you magnificent person.